If they don't know somebody, if they never heard, don't give these tests. How do you feel about blacks? I hate them. How do you feel about Jews? Oh yeah, to the camps. How do you feel about Wallonians? And he would make up a word that didn't sound German. I hate them. Okay. All right, so that's the kind of stuff you're getting here. He found these people also to be emotionally insecure. These were the happy campers. And they tended to look towards strong leaders. All of this came from, he argued, from a dictator-based family. Dads in these families were cold, aloof disciplinarians, raising children with a lot of corporal punishment. They're getting beaten on a regular basis. The mom is not a counteracting force to the dad. Children growing up in that kind of environment are not happy campers. This is not a good way to raise children. They become withdrawn, they become angry and resentful, insecure, and a tendency to look for scapegoats. That's the second explanation we're talking about.
When he asked about, when he made up these words that didn't sound German, did he ever make up one that sounded German to try and see the other side of it? I don't know. That
would be an interesting point to try and see. He might have, I don't know. And I would bet that they'd find they'd like them. Okay, a second explanation for this, and it's related to the first. What we know about most people who are prejudiced is they don't come from the upper classes as much as they come from lower classes. The American South is a classic example of that during that Jim Crow era. The most virulent racists in the American South during Jim Crow came from poor whites. How come? Here we talk about what's called scapegoating. The book talks about this. I'm not going to go with this frustration and aggression. I don't have time for it. It's related, but unimportant in this context. Scapegoating is where you yourself are unhappy and you're angry at somebody, but instead of taking your anger out on that original source, you find a convenient target that you can take your anger out on. It's called scapegoating. There's an old cartoon. Boss yells at a worker. You can't yell back at the boss. He's angry. He goes home and yells at his wife. She yells at the oldest kid. The oldest kid yells at the youngest kid. The youngest kid goes out and kicks the dog. There's an old American saying, S rolls downhill, as being a four-letter word. And what that means is we have a tendency towards scapegoating. When you're angry and unhappy, it's often the case you take your anger out on a safe target. What we know about being poor is it generates an awful lot of resentment and anger, no matter what your color. Now, however, in the South, those poor whites had somebody to vent their anger on, blacks. But there's always somebody around like that. Today in the United States, because, as I just said, are a lot of white males suffering as a result of the changes in the economy and seeing their income go down. Yes, but now what are they attracted to? Hating immigrants. Is that scapegoating? Yes, it is. Okay, so that's that stuff. You should know about the largest minority groups in the United States. The largest racial minority group in the United States today, Latinos or Hispanics, about 17%, this is 16%, it's now 17%. The group is growing quite rapidly. Largest and rapidly growing, the largest membership amongst that group, Mexican Americans, about 60 to 80% of all Latinos in the United States are of Mexican American origin. In general, Mexican Americans are better off than African Americans in terms of income, according to official statistics, but worse off than whites. I say official because official statistics don't count the undocumented. That might make Latinos worse off than even African Americans. At any rate, next, Puerto Ricans, only about 10% of all Latinos, but they are worse off than African Americans. They are actually worse off than anybody, economically. Found largely in Puerto Rico, but a small portion. And then Cuban Americans, the best off of Latinos. Small, about 5%. They tend to be fairly upper class people who fled communism and come to the United States. Mostly upper class people bring their skills and abilities with them. African Americans, second largest, but the worst off economically, again, according to official statistics. They have faced some of the worst racism in the country's history. The most degrading practices, slavery, Jim Crow was always predominantly aimed at African Americans. Jim Crow laws, civil rights movement, Black Power movement. Asian Americans, actually, in the contrast, are probably the best off ethnic group in the United States. If you just look at income, family-based income, Asian Americans have a higher income than white Anglos do. But they have more workers. On a per capita basis, in many cases, they actually have a slightly lower income than white Anglos, but on a family basis, a higher one. What does that mean? More people working in the family. Classically, Asian family owns a restaurant. Family consists of mom, dad, and 2 kids. Who's working in the restaurant?
All of them.
All of them.
All of them. All of them. All right. But Asians are also seen to be a group with a couple of cultural advantages. 1, strong family structures. 2, a cultural appreciation for the importance of education, the so-called Confucian tradition. In this regard, Asian Americans are often compared to Jewish Americans, both because Jewish Americans have very strong family structures and a strong cultural appreciation for education, the so-called rabbinical or rabbi tradition. Asian Americans are also growing rapidly in the population. They're currently the second largest racial minority group in California. There are a larger number of Asians in California than there are African Americans. But nationwide, that's not the case. But most Asian growth is a result of legal immigration. There's a worldwide brain drain from Asia coming here. Native Americans, second worst off economically and some of the worst treated, if you tell any group in the United States that faced genocide, Native Americans. Now, most of that genocide was accidental by way of the introduction of diseases never seen in the population. What's the most famous disease?
Smallpox.
Yeah. Okay, now I want to go back and start preparation. Talk about the final exam. Okay. Anybody taking the final exam take home? Oh, cool. Nobody's taking that? Okay, that makes my review much easier. Okay, so I assume everybody else is going to do the multiple choice. This final is cumulative, but mostly since the midterm. But let me talk to you about what to pay attention to. What I'm going to do is go back to the major concepts and give you a rough weight of how many questions are associated with them. So remember, this final exam will have 100 multiple choice questions. If I say 15 questions are related to race and ethnicity, that means 15% of your finals in this area. Okay? So I will go back to the very beginning. I'm not going to do anything about social theory. Forget that. The origins of sociology, the discipline, yes, that can potentially have some stuff on the final. And that we talked about the Industrial Revolution, the rise of sociology, and 3 reasons for that. Increased division of labor, urban poverty, rise of the scientific method. Theorists, nothing about Comte, nothing about Spencer, but only Marx, Durkheim, Weber, and functionalism, conflict theory, symbolic interaction. All of that theory stuff together, I'd say about 20 to 25 questions on the final. 20 to 25 questions. Right? Next, deviance. I might ask you a little bit about how the United States compares to other countries in terms of crime. I might ask about violence. Yeah, again, yesterday, up in San Bernardino, another mass shooting, ho-hum, another day, another gun. Okay, it's happening all the time. Why? Culture of violence, and particularly availability of guns. Okay, we talked a little bit about gangs, and particularly punishment. Severity, certainty, speed. That will probably be on the final. But the theories, and not so much the biological theory, that's psychological, there might be a little something about Freudian theory or behaviors, but mostly structural strain theory, labeling theory, and then how we measure crime, the UCR and the NCBS. Something like 8 to 10 questions related to this deviant stuff. 8 to 10 questions related to those topics I just mentioned. Okay? Methods. Causation versus correlation. The experiment, control. Independent, dependent variable. Control group versus experimental group. Reliability versus validity. Survey, questionnaire, Population, census and sample. The survey, questionnaire, population, census and sample. Participant observation, field research, and then the morality of research. Probably about another 8 questions or so related to that stuff. 8 questions related to that. Culture. Oh, just the basic definitions, values, norms, and the forms of norms. That's folkways, mores, and laws. Language and the superior worth hypothesis. And the 4 explanations for culture: sociobiological, ecological, functionalist, and context. I don't know, 6 to 8 questions related to culture. Religion. Now, there's still a lot of that stuff that makes good little, the oldest religion of all religions, the oldest religion of the major ones. Which country has the largest number of Muslims? Which country has the largest number of Jews? Those little questions. The difference between monotheism, polytheism, and non-theistic religions. And examples of each. Oh, the 5, possibly 6 major world religions. And then Durkheim on religion, sacred versus profane, and the role of ritual. The functions of religion. Marx, religion as domination, the opiate of the masses. Weber, Protestant ethic and the rise of industrialism, capitalism. I'd say for religion about 8 questions, maybe as many as 10. 8 to 10 questions related to religion. Okay? Oh, Valinsky's. Well, first the biological background of human evolution. I think 2 or 3 questions related to that. 2 or 3 questions, just the sort of basics. Which continent did humans originate on? What was the first notable human trait to develop? That kind of stuff. But then the basics of Valinsky's subsistence technology, the social surplus and its relationship to culture. And those 4 stages of human society: hunting and gathering, horticulture, agrarian, and industrial. I think, and there's a lot, let's see it here, of that stuff, I think about 12 questions, maybe as few as 10, about 12 questions related to the Valinsky's. 10 to 12 questions. Socialization, nature versus nurture, that debate, and the impact of feral children raised in isolation, and the Harlow monkey studies. Piaget will be back. All 4 of those stages, and you still need to know them. Cooley, the looking glass. Self, me, taking the role of the other, the concrete and generalized other. Me, the stages of role learning. That's the main stuff. I'd say all that stuff there, probably about, 7, 8 questions related to that. There might be 1 question or so about socialization of kids, and maybe 1 about the life course. So 7 to 8, maybe total, maybe 8 to 10, something like that, related to socialization. Interaction, sociology of everyday life, reaching, nonverbal communication, sociolinguistics, dramaturgy of Gotham.